Hi guys, this is Warwick from Casual Chess, back for another 5-minute game today, playing as black against an opponent from Egypt. He starts with e4, I'll play e5, and let's get into it from here. Just while we're getting into the game, something you may notice is over here on the right hand side, you'll see that the amount that I gain from winning or the amount that I lose from losing a game has changed over time. It used to be much more. And that's dropped away now. The reason for that is because the more games you win, lose, play, whatever, the lower the K factor, I believe that's what it's called. Now that's the degree to which your rating fluctuates based on your performance. At the start, when you first get an account, that K factor is very high, and so any wins or losses are going to increase or decrease your score very rapidly. This is while the game tries to essentially figure out, are you as good as we are estimating you to be? So now, having played quite a few games, it's got that down to about 14. I believe it levels out at about 7 or 8 when your opponent is exactly the same ranking that you are. So anyway, moving beyond that now. We've both got reasonable development of the center here. I think I'm going to look for something like d5. And retake with that knight if retakes with the pawn. Alternatively, okay, no, I was going to say alternatively we have the option to advance that pawn, but looks like we don't in this circumstance because he did retake. Playing pretty well for time here, which is good. I think I'll play Bg4 and then look to take that knight on f3 if he doesn't redirect the knight currently on e2, enabling him to retake with the queen. Here's an idea. I'll actually play Nf4, and then if takes with that bishop, I will retake with that pawn. Having that pawn up the board will potentially be an advantage for me. It will also kick the knight currently on g3. It should kick him to h5 and then of course takes. Okay, he plays h3. Now after h3, what if something like knight takes h3 and then upon retakes again with the bishop? You know, I think I will play something like that. I think I'll sacrifice that knight to really destroy his kingside protection. Okay, I'm not too concerned by that at the moment. I don't really understand why that's a big deal. I can't block with the f pawn on f6, so I think I'll play to c8. And then after c8, look to redirect to something like g4. g4 would actually be a fork because that would enable me to take on either g5 or g3, since that pawn that would retake if I took on g3 is pinned by the bishop. So let's see where this gets us. He's taken some time to think. He's got a 1 pawn advantage at the moment, given that I sacrificed that piece. Looks like my opponent is in a bit of trouble with his internet connection at the moment. He does have a low connection, so high lag it says. If he does drop out of this game, no hard feelings, we'll just get back on with it. I can appreciate that it's quite hard to focus when you're really, you're dropping in and out of the game, so. Still no progress yet. Now if it gets really down to it, I think probably the fair thing to do would be to offer this guy a draw. I'll wait and see if he does continue playing. Great, I was about to say I hope he continues playing, and he has indeed. And he's played rook to e1. I don't see how rook to e1 actually interferes with any of my plans here, so I will play queen to g4, and unless I'm mistaken that is actually a fork of g3 and g5. So I've lost that pawn in the center there, but it looks like this is game over because queen takes g3. There's no option to retake because that pawn is pinned to the king there across f2 and g1. He resigns. Okay, that's a pretty good win. I'll give him a tick for being a good sport, and he'd like to rematch, so let's get into it. Obviously you can see the checkmate coming was queen on g2. Okay, so I'm playing as white now. Let's get into it and start with d5. Sorry, d4. He plays Nf6, Indian game, so I'll play c4. My usual approach. Okay. I'll simply play e3 to open up that bishop line to attack that c4 pawn if he does retake. He does not. Developing that knight now towards the center. He pins the knight. I'll unpin the knight by developing that bishop slightly. And I'll force a take of that knight. Alternatively, he could move his bishop back to a5, but with another kick again, he's just lost that piece now. So, if bishop drops back to b6, I simply have c5 that traps him in there. Not only that, but I've got quite a good storm on the left side of that board here, the queen side. So, I'm expecting something along the lines of bishop takes. An alternative move might be knight to d7, so that when I take with my pawn, he can retake with his knight. He doesn't go in for that though. Great, now I think it's time to try and get some pieces off the board and really solidify this advantage that I've got. And the question is, how am I going to actually do that? I don't really see an opportune moment to trade yet. I'd really like to trade a bishop for a bishop if possible. I'm pretty comfortable with the situation, so I think what I'll do is I'll just hang on. I'll get that rook across to e1. And potentially look to play, I was going to say e4. I think that's actually a mistake here from my opponent. So what I'll do is I will play bishop takes, and after bishop retakes, pawn takes, d takes e5. I'm just not sure how he's going to deal with that move. Okay, so he's dropped back. So I think my idea for this move, for this game, is going to be to let go of that pawn on c5, to let go of the pawn on e5, and to try and develop towards the center. So what I'll do is I'll try and hang on to the c5 pawn for a little bit longer because he's lining up on that e5 pawn. I will protect the c5 pawn by moving Na4. Knight takes. Now queen will retake. And now bc3. Now bc3 looks to be somewhat dangerous to me. He's got a double attack now on that knight on a4, and what I was looking at was maybe a move like g4 next, which is now off the cards. So be it. Look, we'll play bd4, we'll protect that pawn on c5, that's slightly further up the board. If takes that knight on a4 with the bishop, I will retake with the queen. And we're starting to crystallise some of that advantage. So I'm fairly happy with how we're going. Again, not too worried about that at the moment. I think I'll play Nc3, forcing the queen to drop back. I don't see where else he could go to except g4, which I would then take on because I want to get more pieces off the board since I've got the advantage presently. What I'd really like to do is get my rook on a1 into the game, and I'm thinking I might do that by playing b1. Just forces him to continue protecting that b7 pawn. Now, just in case my opponent offers a rematch, I'll let him know that I have to leave after this one. I think we'll call it there for today. Yeah, definitely a struggle with an internet connection on his end there, which is a bit unfortunate. I don't really like to see a game being determined by whether or not someone's got a good connection or a bad connection. I suspect this opponent is a pretty good player, and he's really just struggling with time, because if you think about it, he's got a significant amount less than I do because of the troubles he's having at the moment by the looks of it. Just 70 seconds left to go for him. And he used this time to think about where he might drop his queen to. Possibly he may drop his queen back to e6, e7 or e8, although I think e8 is unlikely. Probably the best move that I can see would be dropping the queen back to e7 so that he could redirect to the g5 square if needed. e6 is not too bad. I would also suggest, okay, looking to get some of those pieces off the board now. I think I will take that queen offer. It doubles his pawns on the G file. And I think what I'll do now is I will advance my e4 pawn, well, e3 pawn to e4. If retakes with that pawn, then retakes with the knight, getting this knight into the game just a little bit more. And then if retakes with the bishop, retakes with the rook. So let's see how that would happen. Pawn takes, knight takes, bishop takes, rook takes. Okay, unfortunately that's a win by timeout, but I don't think we played too badly there. I only got 22 moves into the game. We'll come back with the analysis and see how we did. Possibly we played a couple of moves which weren't the best, but I'm happy with that development, and I don't think that e4 move at the end there was too bad either. Alright, well, I'll be back in a moment with the analysis and we will see. Hey guys, we're back with the analysis now. So, looking up the top right, you can see that graph of the game is not too bad, definitely in our favour, and I suspect this all really started when he threw away that bishop. So that's it. After a3, kicking that bishop, he really should have taken that knight. I believe at the time during the commentary I did say that that was actually going to happen. I thought that that was forced, and that's because he didn't see the outcome. So my opponent simply played back to c6 after b4, not realizing that I trapped him in there. Now from there we had the advantage really through the rest of the game, although you can see towards the end it did actually drop away a bit here. When did that happen? So, I think it happened when we traded off the board. Actually, pardon me, so it was the knight being redirected from A4 to C3 was fine. My opponent playing across was fine. And I threw away some advantage on that queen take. I have to disagree with that, because although I did throw away some advantage, I think I really made the end of the game a bit more concrete for I suppose a inexperienced player like me. So maybe that wasn't the best move, but I don't really see it as an inaccuracy. I did understand that it may not be the best idea to allow that pawn that's currently on F5 to go to G4, because it does get him up the board a bit further. Now let's see the next move. E4. So that was an inaccuracy. Now why is that? So let's look at the analysis and see where that's going next. Okay, so after E4, let's play along this line and see what happens. It's actually not suggesting that we retake. That was what I was expecting. It's suggesting actually that we reconsolidate our pieces. Now see, that's interesting to me, and I wouldn't have selected that myself. So let's go back there. So what happens if E4 and then the pawn takes, and then the knight retakes? N takes E4 is a mistake. Now why is that? I see. Now it's actually because of rook E4. Sorry, rook F4, which is really skewering two pieces here, the E4 and D4 squares. Right, so that's actually the issue. I didn't see that one. But hey, there you go. You live and you learn, as I always say. Right, so in that case E4 was a mistake, although the advantage was still there, and we may have thrown away some of it if but nonetheless, we got the win with that one, and it's because of the disconnect. I feel a little bit bad about it, but the guy was a good sport, so we will take those points. He was a pretty decent opponent, especially in that first game. I think we had a tougher time. But anyway, look, we'll call it there for today. We'll just walk through the moves before we go. 11 best moves, 3 excellent moves, 2 good moves, 3 book moves, and 3 inaccuracies for me. My opponent had 1 less inaccuracy, but he did have a blunder. Otherwise his moves were all about the same, except a few less excellent moves and a few less best moves. But okay, that's to be expected to some degree. Anyway guys, it looks like the game really was ended by a blunder, which is always a shame, but I think we've got something to learn from that. So, alright, I will catch you in the next one guys. Thanks for watching again today. Give us a like if you'd like to. If you don't like it, then please let me know why and what I can do to improve. Thank you for that. I will see you next time.